Dearest listeners, today is the first chapter of our story on Just Breathe for caregivers. I want to introduce you to my partner in this process, Cindy, and she's going to share her story as to how we start.
I've been a caregiver for most of my life. I'm the oldest of 4 siblings, and so caregiving has always been something I've been doing. And most last couple of years, I ended up taking care of my husband, Randy.
What was wrong with Randy?
The first time we figured something was wrong with him was about 6 years in our marriage, and he ended up having a very swelled ankle. And he came to me and he says, "What do you think this is?" And I said, "I think you need to go to the ER because something seriously is wrong." He didn't have any other symptoms other than just this huge ankle of his started to swell up really bad. He came back and said, they told me I had type 2 diabetes. And his sugars were really high, like 800.
So, what happened? What went through your mind when you found out he had type 2 diabetes?
Well, I was surprised because he had lost so much weight after we got married. He had probably lost like 50 pounds and he was doing really well, for himself. And then all of a sudden this disease just appeared. Now, it could have been that he had this before and we just didn't know it. There was no symptoms that we knew of at that time, and then it just kind of came to a head.
Okay. So after that emergency room visit, what happened with his health?
It got progressively worse through the years.
And how long did this go on for that you were dealing with this?
About 10 years.
Okay. So at some point, you ended up becoming his caregiver.
Yes.
When did that happen?
Well, the first time I became his caregiver a couple of times. And the caregiving portion of this happened back to 2011 when he ended up having part of his foot amputated because he had an infection that grew underneath his foot that got into the bone. So they had to amputate part of his foot. And that's when I started being able to get more involved in his medical. So he needed help with his feet. He could not feel the bottom of his feet anymore. He started getting ulcers on his feet. And I was the one who was helping him wrap his feet every single day, making sure there was no other infections, making sure that he wasn't stepping on anything that could make the foot get a cut or anything like that. Since he wasn't able to feel, he didn't know if he stepped on anything. So every night I would check his feet.
So eventually his kidneys started to fail?
Yes, that happened back in 2019. And we didn't know that's what it was at the time. We thought it was dehydration. We went to go see our grandkids in Florida, and we went on an airboat ride, and afterwards he started walking and he just collapsed. There was no warning. We didn't know what it was. We thought at first it was dehydration. We went ahead and got him some Gatorade and some water, got him some food to eat and so forth. He still couldn't walk, and we ended up getting like 6 or 7 people trying to put him into the car. Now you have to understand, my husband was a huge man. He was 6'4" and weighed about 235-40 pounds, So he ended up being carried to the car so that I could take him to the hospital. And we were in the Everglades at the time, so didn't make sense for us to try to call an ambulance at that point. So I took him to the hospital, and it was there that we discovered he was in kidney failure.
So what challenges did you face with the doctors in the healthcare system?
Well, I was surprised, first of all, that it was a kidney failure when they told us about that because there was no symptoms that we knew about. And they said that because he thought he had taken care of his type 2 diabetes, he had tried to do intermittent fasting. He followed books from doctors saying this is what you can do to help yourself so you don't have to take insulin anymore, things like that. He started doing those kinds of things and felt that he had cured himself. And it turned out that he did not cure himself, and he was not checking his sugars on a regular basis, and therefore we didn't know that his sugars were gradually going up again. And because he wasn't taking his insulin, it affected his kidney.
Okay, so you had frustrations, I know you've talked about, and you ended up becoming his advocate because you felt like there was so much in the medical system that was dropping.
Yeah, it was hard because people would be coming in and out of the hospital, saying, we need to do this, we need to do that, we need to make sure he gets back on his insulin and all this kind of stuff. And, it's just starting all over again, and he was surprised because he thought he had cured himself. And when he didn't cure himself, we didn't know why he had this problem. So the doctor had said he had what was called generational diabetes, which we had never heard of before. But his father had it, and I believe his grandfather also had it. So the men in the family of his family had diabetes. And therefore, since he had generational, they said that it would never go away. And even though his sugars came down significantly, and he thought that he got rid of the diabetes, it gradually did go up.
Okay, so how did you take care of yourself while trying to care for Randy when he was going through all this, and how did it change you?
It was tough. I mean, after 2011, and we went through that process of, going through the kidney failure the first time, we went into COVID, and during the COVID period of time, during COVID, you couldn't do anything. So we ended up, just hanging out together, doing things together. At that point, he was not in the end-stage kidney failure. We thought he was like in the first or second stage. We had seen nephrologists. We've talked a lot about, kidney diets and all that kind of stuff. And we ended up, during that COVID, he ended up getting laid off. And because he got laid off, his stress level really got very high. And he was trying to look for jobs, no one was hiring, and he was getting frustrated, and he was saying, I don't know what we're going to do, and I kept saying, well, God's going to help us because he always has, and he always will find us something, Try not to stress so much. I don't want you to get sick, And during one of those things that we were discussing, he started running up the stairs, like actually going up the stairs, and I was behind him, and he stopped suddenly, and he ended up saying he couldn't walk. And when he said that, I knew it was his kidneys, and I said to him, okay, let's turn around, sit down, and let's find out what's going on with you. Called 911, sent him to the doctors, to the hospital, and they told us there that he had the end-stage renal failure, and which was bad because he had gotten laid off already. We lost his insurance, we lost his life insurance, we lost everything. And now he's in the hospital and we don't have any type of insurance. So taking care of myself at that point, I didn't. I was really focused on him. I really wanted to try to get him started on Medicare because that's all we had, and he was 60 years old, so he didn't qualify. But because he had end-stage renal failure, they qualified him for the Medicare, but that didn't come out for a few more months, and meanwhile, he's getting dialysis, he's getting all this stuff, being done in the hospital, and they're coming to me and they're saying, okay, you need to find home health, or you need to find someone to help you, what are you going to do? They were asking me all these questions that I really wasn't prepared for. And I basically told them that I would probably take care of him because I've been a caregiver most of my life anyway. So I'll probably just go ahead and take care of him, and my husband, was kind of frantic at that point. He didn't know either what to do, so I assured him, I said, look, I'll take you home, I'll take care of you, don't worry, we'll get through this together, and we'll be able to, hopefully get you back on your feet,
Yeah, because it's a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah.
And not knowing, because this is the first time you've ever dealt with end-stage renal.
Right.
Which is...
It was severe.
Catastrophic.
Yeah.
When they talk about catastrophic, that is a catastrophic illness. And you're right. That's one of only a couple of diseases that Medicare will actually cover you if you're under the age of 65. Unfortunately, we didn't know each other at that time
Right.
because I specialize as a health and Medicare agent in helping people get through that process. But, from there, you've talked to me about taking care of him, and this process of taking care of him, you did for 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And you went through a lot of trials and tribulations
Mm-hmm.
taking care of him. And I know it was frustrating and tough, and it really was hard on you. But one of the things that caregivers run into on a constant basis is feeling like you're all alone. How did you feel?
I did feel alone. I didn't have any help, really. I mean, I don't have family here. The only family I had was my youngest daughter, who had moved out before COVID. So it was just me and my husband in the house, And as time went on, it got harder and harder to take care of him. And when I was thinking taking care of him, of course, I was thinking he could help me take care of him. I wasn't thinking I was going to be the only person involved, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Taking care of him. And, I mean, he couldn't use his hands. It turned out he wasn't able to use his hands, so he couldn't dress himself. He couldn't comb his hair. He couldn't brush his teeth. He couldn't eat. I mean, things like that happened while he was in the hospital, and thinking that it was a temporary situation. And the temporary situation ended up happening longer than they anticipated. So when I brought him home, I mean, I had to do everything for him,
So you were like his nurse round the clock.
Yeah, I had to be.
Okay.
So, and at that time, I had a caregiving business, and I had to stop. I told them, all my families at that point, I have working families, that I couldn't do this. I couldn't do and take care of their children because my husband needed me. So I stopped my business, and I was focused on him 24 hours a day. And I ended up, trying to figure out what I'm supposed to do now. So I ended up calling home health. I asked them to come to help me. And they were helpful to a point, but they only came an hour a week. So that wasn't very helpful to me, you know?
Was that after you got the Medicare?
Yes.
So that's a really good point, that Medicare does not provide a lot of home health care.
Mm-hmm.
It's very minimal care. It's like, okay, we're going to come in and help you shower the person once a week, or maybe twice a week if you're lucky.
Yeah, they didn't even do that. They ended up doing physical therapy, and because he had physical therapy, then he wasn't able to get anybody else in there at that time to do something else. It was more important for him to get the physical therapy, and they said that it would be up to me to make sure I can, bathe him and dress him and things like that. And he and I actually learned how to do that without me straining myself and without me straining him, that we were able to, I was able to do that for him, and he started helping me in the ways that he could, so that I could dress him and I could put him in the wheelchair and I could, take him to the bathroom and things like that,
So did they ever offer you or suggest occupational therapy?
No.
Because standardly, when someone has to learn transitioning like that,
Mm-hmm.
you get physical therapy for strength and occupational therapy to teach you how to do the moves and how to get around and how to do that. That's the whole focus behind occupational therapy.
Well, I was kind of lucky about that, because when my grandmother got sick, she was the first one I took care of, and that was years ago. And she was a heavyset woman, and she was a nurse, so she taught me how I could pick her up, and she taught me how to put her in a wheelchair, and she taught me certain things that I could do to help her when she got ill. And I remember those things when I was with my husband, how to lift him up and how to be able to put him in a wheelchair. And of course he had some use of his legs, so he could push, off the bed into the wheelchair, and the wheelchair would be right on against the bed, and I could turn him around and we can get him in the wheelchair, and I can push him in the wheelchair, and getting him into the car, was a little bit more harder to do. But as long as he was able to use some part of his legs to help me get him in the car, he would, so that went on for a while.
How long do you think?
Well, it went on for about 6 months, until I started noticing that he had something going on with his brain. And the reason I say that is because he stopped communicating. and this is during the dialysis. He's going 3 times a week now. We're taking him to dialysis and everything. And then, gradually I started noticing he wasn't talking as much. And I would ask him questions and he wouldn't answer. And, especially when I would take him out on a ride, he loved going outside. He liked me taking him just around places and stuff like that just to get him out. And I would start talking and he'd just stare. And I said, something's not right, and he didn't know what it was. He didn't understand either what was happening. So I ended up talking to the dialysis people about it, and they said, well, his numbers are always good, and they were more concerned about his numbers. They were concerned about, what was going on with him in dialysis. And if anything else was happening with him, they really didn't know what to do. So I had to figure that out. So I ended up calling a neurologist and talking to his primary doctor about it and letting him know this is what I think. I think we need to get him tested. Something's not right with him. And that's when I found out he had vascular dementia.
And then what were they able to do for the vascular dementia?
They gave him medicine to keep it from going too rapid.
To slow it down?
Yeah, to slow it down. And so they gave him medicine, but I did find out through his podiatrist that there was an oxygen chamber in his office, that if I were to put him in the oxygen chamber, that would help get oxygen, brand new oxygen into his body, which could help his vascular dementia and also his body to heal better. And it so happened that he did have another episode of his foot and had a bacterial infection. And because of that, we were able to put him into the oxygen tank. And we did that every day for 3 months. And he was in that oxygen tank for about an hour. And then he would come out, and within a week to 2 weeks, he started talking again, which was a miracle, because I was thinking, wow, whatever is happening now with his oxygen is really helping him,
on the mind,
and his bacterial infection didn't get better for 3 months. It took a while for that to get better. So as long as that infection was slowly progressing, I guess, he was able to go into the oxygen tank, which was helping him, on his brain. So that was a plus for us. And then after the bacterial infection did go away, we couldn't put him anymore into the oxygen tank because they wouldn't cover it.
So who came from, because you have a lot of family in Florida, did anybody come to help you out at all?
Well, my youngest daughter was there with her fiance at the time and some friends and so forth, and they came to help me quite a bit. Whenever I needed help, I would call them and say, can you help me? Because sometimes he would fall, and I would have to call 911, and he hated that I did that, but, I couldn't lift him.
Yeah.
So he's on the floor, and I couldn't lift him, so I had to call 911, There was other times I called my daughter and her fiance and some friends, and they would come over, because they lived close by. They would come over, and they would lift him into the chair, And I had other friends, that did that for me. But as far as, my daughters had their own families, my other daughters had their own families and so forth, I couldn't see getting them to come and help me. They had little babies, So I ended up getting friends who had, I had friends in Florida that came to help me, and they would stay with me about 2 to 3 weeks, and they would help me throughout the day, And then I had neighbors. God bless my neighbors, they came around too. If I needed help, I would run over to my neighbor's house, and I would say, I need your help right now, and they would stop whatever they were doing, and they would come over and they would help me, But most of the time I was by myself, and I did what I could do on my own.
So how did that impact you in your life? Because you're now at this point quite ways into caring for him for quite a long time.
Yeah.
At least a year where it was really bad.
Yeah.
So how did that impact your life and you, not just your physical, but your emotional and mental health?
I grieved a lot. I was grieving a lot. I cried a lot. I mean, I was sobbing, because I couldn't believe this was happening. And he was still so young, I felt like, I could see everything, flashing by us, things that we had planned for. We had planned for our 25th anniversary coming up, and we wanted to go overseas and, have a nice 25th anniversary, and I could see that that wasn't going to happen, So I started grieving. I had a back patio, and then whenever he was asleep, I would go in the back patio and I would just cry it all out, and just allow myself just to cry, and I try not to allow him to see me cry because I didn't want to upset him. So I did that. I did it in secret. I did a lot of my crying in secret. I did a lot of my writing. I did journaling a lot. I journaled a lot of things. It didn't make sense. It didn't care to me. I just wrote whatever was in my mind. Helped me. I started doing essential oils, which really helped at night to calm me down and calm him down. I had an aroma therapy that I was doing with him and for myself, and that helped a lot too. But for the most part,
yeah, because you're grieving not just the care that you're having to give for him, but you're grieving hey, we have all these retirement plans like so many people do. We put things off while we're actively working because we're going to do them when we get to retirement.
Right.
And the problem with that is that, in your case,
he didn't even make it to
he
retirement.
didn't make it to retirement.
No, he didn't.
So you don't have the joys and the plans, and you lost a lot.
Yeah, we did.
With him being as sick as he was and losing what you lost. And, it was good that you did have friends and neighbors and people to help you, but it's still hard because it's you 24/7.
Right.
You're on 24/7. Even if you think that he's gone to sleep, okay, I can sleep. Just like having a baby, you got one ear open all the time.
All the time.
And that's why I think women become caregivers more than men, because we have that motherly instinct into us.
Yeah, and I couldn't leave him at night. I stayed with him. I couldn't even go to our own bedroom. I created a new bedroom for us downstairs because he couldn't climb the stairs anymore. So I slept with him, up until he passed away.
So at some point, did hospice come into the picture for you?
Yes, I had to take him into the hospital again because what happened was while they were removing the port from his neck to his arm, the first time they did that, he had a lot of problems, and we didn't realize what the problems were at that time, and he had developed an aneurysm. And unfortunately, the aneurysm did burst in the middle of the night. He almost died. I prayed and cried to God not to take him this way. Please don't take him this way. And he survived it. And to me, that was a miracle too, because he lost 5 pounds of blood. And they said that there was no way he should have survived this, but he did. And from that point on, taking care of him and so forth, we found out, that his body was getting better because of the oxygen tank and things like that, came later. And basically what happened there is that he started walking again. He started taking the walker, and then he got to the cane, got out of the wheelchair, and he was getting stronger. He was walking, he was eating. Things were getting better.
So you lived on a roller coaster.
I did. And I was excited for him, and he was excited for himself because he could see his body was getting better. So we knew the dialysis was working. We knew that, the oxygen tank really helped him. And we were just trying to continue this momentum we had, and we wanted to be able to, get him to the point where, he was better, I tried to get him to at least 100% better, right? But, we got him maybe 70% better, which is better than 20%, which was after he had that aneurysm, And I was very protective of him because they wanted to go back in and do surgery again. And I told them, no, there's no way you're going to do that to him, and I had to advocate for him all the time because things that some doctors wanted to do, I didn't want them to do because he was too weak. And I just felt like, that they needed to wait for him to get stronger for him to have another surgery, that the surgery he had already just took him out pretty much,
And so that became a lot on you to be the advocate and to have to make judgment calls and decisions.
Yes.
And that's where a lot of caregivers, it's a tremendous amount of stress. And these situations, like when the aneurysm burst, There's not time to say, I'm going to call family members.
No.
You don't have that luxury.
No.
There's no time to think about it. You have to literally, you got 30 seconds to a minute to make a decision.
Yeah. Calling 911 while I'm holding his arm, trying to keep the blood from getting out, right? And, just praying and crying out to God not to let him go like this,
So, and that's going to be another part of this that I know personally from my experience that I found I spent a lot of time praying,
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like I gained a new relationship with God
Yeah, me too.
going through being a caregiver,
Yeah.
where you could have drifted away for a long time. But once you're in that position and you see the things you see,
Right.
you start to understand
Yeah.
that there is a God.
Yeah.
And it's whatever, you're happy with and whatever you're comfortable with. But we all have, our personal beliefs. And that without whatever higher being there, you would not be able to get through. You wouldn't get through it, and the other person that you're
Right.
taking care of wouldn't have gotten through that.
Right.
So
of course, we prayed a lot. I read him the Bible a lot. He stopped watching TV and wanted to listen to music. There were certain things he wanted that he never really wanted before, So just basically we ended up, playing music for him. We ended up, reading to him, so just basically that's what we were doing.
So
when he got to that point of going back to the hospital, hospice got involved at that point because they said that his esophagus had obliterated. He could no longer eat and drink. And that the dialysis quit working. So I knew at that point he was not going to make it.
And that's a hard point to be
Yeah.
at. And unfortunately, in caregiving, that is a fact. There's facts of life you just can't change, no matter how hard you want to, or no matter how much you pray that person's going to make it.
Yeah.
Their body just can only do so much.
Yeah.
And our bodies are not infinite, and we come to a point where our bodies just can't be fixed anymore.
Right. And that's what happened. And he made the decision, well, we did, wills, and we did, living wills and stuff like that. We made the decision he didn't want a feeding tube. He didn't want, he just wanted to be let go. And he knew that. So I called my daughters who lived in different states. I called his sister who lived in a different state. They all came, surrounded him during his last days. My brother and my sister-in-law were with me at that time. I had called them, told them what was happening, and they came and they stayed with me for about 6 weeks to help me in his last days. And that included the hospital visit. And then I took him home because I didn't want him to stay in the hospital and die there. I wanted him to be able to be surrounded by his family. And I wanted him to know that he was loved and that he was cared for,
Do.
So it's
I
just, it was a beautiful thing, really, to have all of that there for him, because that was his last moments, was with his family. And he's in heaven. So I feel like, that was what needed to be. God made that decision for him to take him when he wanted to take him. And now, I'll see him again. I believe I will see him again.
So, with everything you've been through, is that what drew you to saying we need to help other people?
Yes, because I went back to caregiving
Yes.
after he passed away. I mean, I was so numb, and I was so, there was just so much that happened, and all of a sudden it just stopped. And when that happens and it stops like that, it's like you lose yourself. And I did lose myself, and I didn't know what I was supposed to do, And I was trying to figure out who am I? Who am I now? I'm not the caregiver, I'm not the wife anymore. I'm not, it was just hard. So the only thing I knew to do was go back into my caregiving. And I went with caregiving the children. And I called them all back, and I started caregiving again with my kids. And that helped me a lot to,
Give you
grieve.
a purpose too.
Right. And I was trying to find a new purpose as well. And helping people is I think is what God wants me to do, is to share my story to you all, so that you're not the only ones out there that are going through this, and there is help out there for you, and there's encouragement and there's support out there for you too. And it was important for me to let you know that I'm here, and we're here for you, and we want to be able to help more and share and be able to do what we can